I believed him because he wasn't talking just to be talking. I felt he was also coming straight because there was a big war behind that. A war that they lost. I think it was a war that destroyed their neighborhood.
Everything you think you know about Tupac and Biggie is a lie. The legendary East Coast-West Coast feud? According to a former cellmate, it was never about loyalty or gang wars. It was a carefully orchestrated plan, a secret pact between hip-hop's most powerful men to remove two of the biggest stars the industry had ever seen. For nearly 30 years, the truth was buried, threats kept witnesses silent, and the masterminds remained untouchable. But now, decades later, with both Diddy and Suge Knight behind bars, the silence is cracking. Who really benefited? Who pulled the strings? And why did the deaths of Tupac and Biggie change everything? The answer will shock you, and it's only just coming to light. Everything we thought we understood about the legendary East Coast-West Coast rivalry unravels once we hear the latest revelation from Tupac Shakur's former cellmate. According to the man who once shared the same prison block, the feud that defined an era wasn't a clash of pride or coastal loyalty at all. It was theater. An elaborate, high-priced illusion crafted to conceal a much darker reality. He claims Shakur's death wasn't born of gang tensions or street revenge, but of business. A calculated agreement between two titans of hip-hop, Sean Diddy Combs and Marion Suge Knight. Their alleged pact, he says, aimed to remove both Shakur and Biggie Smalls, two artists who had grown too powerful, too independent, and too difficult to control. For nearly 3 decades, the cellmate says he stayed silent, terrified by the threats that followed any attempt to speak out. Those who once tried to tell the truth, he insists, vanished without explanation. But now, with both Diddy and Suge serving time on separate charges, he finally believes the moment has come to tell what he knows.
So complicated, convoluted, chaotic. It's hard to actually figure out what's what, but it's becoming clearer.
The timing of this development is hard to ignore. Nearly 30 years after Tupac Shakur was fatally shot on the Las Vegas Strip, Los Angeles investigators finally made a breakthrough in late 2023. Dwayne "Keffi D. Davis, a self-proclaimed leader of the Southside Compton Crips, was taken into custody. Prosecutors claim Davis orchestrated the entire hit, even if he never pulled the trigger himself. He now awaits trial in a Nevada prison, with proceedings scheduled for February 2026. Davis had previously confessed multiple times to police in 2008 and 2009, and later in his own 2019 memoir. In those accounts, he alleged that Sean Diddy Combs offered him $1 million to handle Shakur and Suge Knight. Those very statements became the cornerstone of the case against him. Today, Davis insists he fabricated those confessions, claiming they were nothing more than stories meant to sell books and capture attention. Yet one question lingers. If these were purely fictional tales, how did they mirror decades of whispers from insiders so closely?
Yeah, he was scared. Yes, I agree. I do agree that he was probably terrified for his life. So if that is the case, it's also quite feasible that he put up money to get Pac. You know what I mean?
The deeper we dig into Davis's account, the more tangled the line between truth and manipulation becomes. In a 2008 taped interview with Los Angeles detectives, conducted under a deal granting him limited immunity, Davis recounted the events leading up to Tupac's murder. It all began after a confrontation at the MGM Grand, where his nephew, Orlando Anderson, had been beaten by Shakur and Suge Knight's entourage. Hours later, Davis says he joined Anderson and 2 others in a white Cadillac, seeking retaliation. When they pulled up beside the black BMW carrying Shakur and Suge, gunfire erupted. Shakur was hit multiple times and died 6 days later in a Las Vegas hospital. For years, this was seen simply as gang retaliation, a violent chapter in the coastal rivalry. But Davis eventually added layers to the story: money exchanges, secret meetings, and a promised payout from Diddy that never came. That's where the former cellmate's revelation forces a reconsideration. According to him, the murders weren't merely acts of revenge, they were carefully orchestrated business moves. In his version, Diddy and Suge weren't enemies at all, they were collaborators in a silent pact. Each would eliminate the artist who threatened his empire. Diddy would handle Shakur, Suge would deal with Biggie. The deaths would appear as the inevitable climax of the East Coast-West Coast feud the media had spent years hyping. With both icons gone, Bad Boy and Death Row would retain unchallenged dominance. The claim is audacious, almost unthinkable. Yet the timing demands attention. By 2025, Diddy faced a 50-month federal sentence for transporting women for private encounters, while Suge remained behind bars serving 28 years for voluntary manslaughter. Two titans, once untouchable, now incarcerated, haunted by the ghosts of the same turbulent era.
Satisfied. I don't feel like I've ever embarrassed myself or my people, in nothing I've done. And yet and all, I got the whole world fearing me, you know what I'm saying? At 23, weighing 160 pounds, you know what I'm saying? And I ain't even started. I haven't even rolled my plan out yet, and they scared. I got the vice president know who I am, the president, every cop in every city.
To grasp how this theory took hold, we need to rewind to 1994. Inside Quad Studios in Times Square, Tupac Shakur was ambushed and shot 5 times in what was officially labeled a robbery. Biggie and Diddy were upstairs that night. In interviews from his hospital bed, Shakur directly accused them of knowing the attack was a setup. That moment shattered their friendship and ignited the narrative of the East Coast versus West Coast rivalry. But what if that incident was more than it seemed, the opening act in a far larger, carefully orchestrated story? If Shakur's suspicions were correct, they revealed the interests of men whose power depended on loyalty, control, and silence. From that point on, every move he made put him in danger. The following year, Suge Knight posted Shakur's bail and brought him onto Death Row Records. Outwardly, they appeared allied. Behind closed doors, insiders hinted at tension. Shakur was plotting his own label, Machiavelli Records, negotiating direct distribution deals that could bypass Suge's control and threaten the millions flowing through Death Row's street-link networks. Meanwhile, on the East Coast, Biggie was pursuing the same path with a potential independent label, The Commission, alongside Jay-Z and others. 2 artists, one on each coast, both preparing to own their music outright. For Diddy and Suge, such independence wasn't just a threat to authority, it could mean financial ruin. The Cellmate's account claims this was the exact moment the shadowy agreement took shape, around mid-1990s, designed to remove the 2 stars before their autonomy could destabilize the empires of those in power. The summer of 1996, the same season as the Mike Tyson fight in Las Vegas, marked a turning point. Allegedly, both moguls realized that eliminating their stars was the only way to maintain control. It sounds almost unimaginable, until the events themselves are revisited. On September 7, 1996, after the Tyson bout, Shakur and Suge Knight assaulted Orlando Anderson in the MGM Grand Lobby. Hours later, the fatal drive-by occurred. Police initially viewed it as gang retaliation, with Davis and his crew taking the brawl as justification. But Davis's later admissions paint a different picture. He claimed Diddy promised him $1 million to carry out the attack and spent years attempting to collect the payment through a Harlem intermediary known as Zip. In a 2008 interview with a filmmaker, Davis recalled confronting Zip weeks after the shooting, only to learn that Diddy had never paid. If Diddy never paid, why did Davis continue to protect him? Was it fear, or was there another unspoken agreement ensuring his safety in exchange for silence? Police documents reveal that after Davis's confessions, LA and Vegas investigators clashed over jurisdiction, each wary that the other might leak information implicating powerful figures. The standoff was so tense it nearly erupted into violence, delaying the case for another decade and burying the truth beneath layers of bureaucratic chaos. Meanwhile, Suge Knight's behavior became increasingly erratic. Although injured during the MGM shooting, he survived. 6 months later, Biggie Smalls was ambushed in Los Angeles after leaving a Soul Train awards party. Witnesses reported Diddy's car just ahead of Biggie's when gunfire erupted from a dark Impala. Retired Detective Greg Kading later suggested the attack was likely orchestrated from within Death Row's inner circle. Yet even Kading admitted that Suge had access to intermediaries capable of moving between gangs and law enforcement freely. If Suge arranged Biggie's demise while Diddy financed Shakur's, the symmetry is chilling. Davis later reflected, I lost my friend, Tupac died. I lost business. I lost a house that night. I lost my freedom. In the years that followed, both men capitalized on the legend. Diddy released I'll Be Missing You and built a billion-dollar empire, while the shadow of the past continued to shape hip-hop history. In the years that followed, both men carved very different legacies. Diddy transformed into the face of corporate hip-hop, building a lifestyle brand and a media empire. Suge Knight, meanwhile, turned Death Row into a mythic symbol of fear, only to see it collapse under lawsuits, investigations, and internal chaos. Publicly, they traded barbs in interviews, but never descended into open warfare. Now, with Diddy's criminal convictions and Suge facing retrial turmoil, the old silence is beginning to crack. The former cellmates claim that they were never rivals, but collaborators, suddenly aligns with the fragments of truth scattered over decades, overlapping timelines, mirrored motives, and carefully orchestrated outcomes. Even law enforcement veterans have hinted at a connection between the two cases. Greg Kading once noted that Biggie's investigation led directly back to the same network funding death row's operations. When police raided Davis's home in 2023, they discovered old magazine clippings chronicling both Shakur and Biggie's tragedies, suggesting he kept trophies or reminders of unfinished business. Yet Davis maintains his innocence, insisting the entire narrative was constructed from his own boastful interviews. "I feel like it's big," he told investigators when asked if there was more to the story than just gang retaliation.
"It was bigger than Orlando. Pac.
There's more here."
Why is the story emerging now?
Some insiders believe the cellmate came forward after learning prosecutors planned to call new witnesses in Davis's trial, including former death row employees who could link the shootings directly to financial orders from the top. Others suggest guilt drove him, a need to correct the record, knowing history still treats Shakur's murder as gang retaliation rather than what it might have been, a coordinated effort to erase two artists who threatened to own themselves. And this raises the central question haunting every revelation. If Shakur and Biggie were silenced not by enemies, but by the very men who built their careers, what were these artists preparing that frightened Diddy and Suge enough to remove them from the stage forever? Now, with both moguls behind bars on unrelated charges, the story reflects back like a mirror. Two men who once ruled opposite coasts, bound by power, ambition, and the ghosts of the era they helped define. The two coasts of hip-hop, once rivals in the public eye, now share the same destiny: guilty, confined, and surrounded by whispers that refuse to fade. Diddy's 2025 conviction for transporting women for private encounters sent shockwaves through the music world, not only for the scandalous details, but for what it exposed about control, loyalty, and the abuse of power. Witnesses painted scenes that sounded less like parties and more like rituals of dominance. Prosecutors portrayed him as a man who built empires through fear and secrecy, traits that eerily mirrored those Suge Knight displayed decades earlier, when death row records became synonymous with menace and money. These parallels cannot be dismissed as coincidence.
"I don't think they are scared of him," a source said.
It's more that they don't want him to embarrass their reputation and everything they've been known for. Side by side, the headlines reveal a pattern. Diddy's downfall came through federal indictments, surveillance footage, and testimonies from people who said they had been silenced by contracts and threats. Suge's collapse arrived through bankruptcy filings, lawsuits, and infamous moments like the 2015 camera footage showing him chasing two men outside a Compton burger stand. Both men turned their labels into kingdoms. Both ruled through loyalty and fear. And both lost control over their brightest stars. Shakur, threatening to leave death row, and Biggie, planning an independent label to free himself from Bad Boy. To moguls who equated autonomy with treason, these weren't creative ambitions, they were escape attempts. So what if the East versus West feud wasn't a rivalry at all, but a business war dressed up as entertainment? Every shooting, every diss track, every public insult could have been carefully staged to conceal the real motive: dominance over an industry worth hundreds of millions.
Posthumous profits tell a stark story.
Both Bad Boy and Death Row benefited enormously from sales, merchandise, and licensing deals after the deaths of their stars.
Public mourning masked private gain.
The theory gains weight when considering how deeply the tragedies were buried. Retired detectives, vanished witnesses, and withheld evidence created a wall of silence. Former investigators like Greg Kading have admitted that infighting between Los Angeles and Vegas police crippled the investigation. At one point, tensions ran so high that officers nearly came to blows over jurisdiction. The pieces of the puzzle may have been there all along, hidden in plain sight, waiting for decades to resurface. Fula, one of Shakur's closest allies, was found lifeless just weeks after promising to testify. Orlando Anderson, long suspected as the shooter, was gunned down in another unresolved street attack before he could face trial. Documents mysteriously disappeared between departments, leaving only rumors and fragments behind. The silence wasn't natural, it was orchestrated. "I'm not saying it's some grand conspiracy," a source explained. "But brother, he had that conversation with Cake Slate just 2 weeks before he was murdered."
Industry insiders now claim that many knew the truth.
According to the cellmate who broke his decades-long silence, executives, producers, and even journalists understood the real arrangement. Some were allegedly paid off, while others stayed silent out of fear. This helps explain why, for 30 years, Official investigations circle the same suspects but never reach the powerful figures behind them. When Diddy and Suge clashed publicly, the media framed it as a feud between titans. Behind closed doors, however, they reportedly shared lawyers, enforcers, and overlapping financial backers. The entire hip-hop empire of the 90s seemed to hinge on one silent agreement: protect the myth, and nobody talks. Shakur and Biggie weren't just talented artists, they were disruptors. They threatened to reshape the industry, and for moguls who equated control with survival, that was unacceptable.
And they weren't the only ones who knew too much.
Pulling back, a grim constellation of disappearances and suspicious deaths emerges. Rappers like Big L in Harlem, Fat Pat in Houston, and Soulja Slim in New Orleans, all killed before their careers could peak. Associates tied to Death Row and Bad Boy vanished under mysterious circumstances, their deaths written off as street violence rather than industry-related eliminations. It paints a chilling picture. A generation of hip-hop, its brightest stars and rising talents, caught in a shadow network where ambition, money, and fear dictated who survived and who didn't. Behind every story from that era, the same elements kept appearing: unpaid debts, disputed contracts, and powerful figures who somehow walked away untouched. Because him and Diddy were giving that deal, an insider explained.
We had to keep these East Coast rappers down.
Meanwhile, the Southern artists, Cash Money, No Limit, Ludacris, they were flipping small money into bigger fortunes for themselves. Those years weren't just competitive, they were predatory. Many of the same bodyguards, producers, and managers who orbited Diddy and Suge Knight later surfaced in investigations ranging from armed robbery to extortion. When artists like Lisa Left Eye Lopez publicly hinted at dark industry secrets before her fatal car crash in 2002, fans dismissed it as paranoia. Yet, when her death is placed alongside the violent ends of lesser-known figures such as Yafula Fula or associates of Jamal Barrow, a pattern emerges: less coincidence, more systemic purge. Those who managed the money, the paperwork, and the evidence rarely survived the decade, and those who did spoke little. Through it all, Diddy and Suge remained alive, powerful, and insulated. They were the architects who somehow outlasted the chaos they helped create. Each built an empire atop the ruins of those around them, their wealth expanding as rivals disappeared. By the time the bodies stopped falling, the balance of power had already shifted. The message was clear: speak out and vanish. In the 90s, hip-hop wasn't just music.
It was power. And power leaves bodies behind. 2 weeks ago, my assistant approached me outside my office.
"Suge wants to speak to you from jail," he said.
"Who?"
I asked.
"Suge Knight," he replied.
Now, with both men behind bars, that old agreement may finally be cracking. Diddy's sentencing letters paint him as broken, humbled to the core, while Suge's retrial filings portray him as defiant, accusing former partners of betrayal. Each seems intent on rewriting history from within, casting themselves as victims of larger forces. Yet the symmetry is impossible to ignore. Both built empires on intimidation.
Both watched their brightest stars turn against them.
And both fell once those stars were gone. The Cellmate's account makes this alignment feel almost preordained, as if what we once thought were rival destinies were actually two sides of the same design. Still, unanswered questions keep multiplying. Why were Diddy's alleged payments to Kef D never traced? Why were early statements tying financial motives to the case ignored? And why did so many witnesses describe the same sequence of events: Hollywood meetings, late-night phone calls, cash offers, only for those leads to vanish from official records? The closer we look, the more it feels like the truth wasn't just buried, it was actively protected. The truth was not just hidden, but actively protected. When Las Vegas police finally arrested Kef D in 2023, nearly 30 years after the shooting, their case rested almost entirely on his own bragging. If that's all they had, then either he is the unluckiest storyteller alive, or someone much higher up needed him to take the fall. As the 2026 trial approaches, the stakes could not be higher. If Kef D is convicted, the industry can close the book and pretend justice was served. But if he walks free, we are forced to confront a far more uncomfortable reality. The real architects of those tragedies have never been touched by the law. Suge remains in prison for a separate crime, fighting his retrial from a San Diego cell, while Diddy serves his sentence in a Brooklyn facility, stripped of his companies but still shielded by layers of influence. We are left wondering whether their separate downfalls are simply the final act of the same unfinished story. Perhaps the question was never who fired the gun, but who needed the silence that followed. The Cellmate's confession is not just a revelation, It is a reminder that power in this business has always come at a price. Cameras may fade, records may sell, but the truth keeps resurfacing. Keffi D's trial could finally bring that truth into the light, or bury it for another generation, because the only people who know for sure are the ones who cannot or will not speak.
And right now, they are all behind bars.
What do we believe? Was it loyalty, greed, or fear that sealed the fates of Shakur and Biggie? This story is far from finished, and until the next revelation breaks, the only choice is to stay watching, stay questioning, and remember, in this industry, nothing happens by accident.